It is sadly ironic that Americans, once defined by their frontier spirit, rugged individualism, and limited government, now must ask permission to do things our ancestors took for granted. Fishing to feed your family, that'll require a license. Teaching yoga to a few friends? You'll need a certificate. Building a shed in your backyard? Better check with the zoning office. Playing music in the park or making wine in your basement? Expect fines or bureaucratic entanglement if you skipped the proper channels. Actions that were once considered basic, peaceful, and private are now the regulated domain of the state. This is not liberty. It is a slow, creeping inversion of the American ideal, one in which government has gone from being the protector of rights to the permission giver for life. In a genuinely free society, you don't need a license to live your life, provided you're not harming others. But in a society governed by bureaucracy instead of principle, that presumption flips. It was Ayn Rand who observed, "We are fast approaching the stage where the government is free to do anything it pleases, while the citizens may act only by permission." Take, for instance, the basic act of fishing. For most of human history, catching a fish was as natural and necessary as breathing air. Today, Americans must first obtain a government license, pay a fee, follow a calendar, observe a list of restricted species, and in some places, report the catch. Our founders never visualized a day when government assumed the authority to charge citizens for the right to gather food for personal use. Yet we have allowed government to convert that liberty into a regulated activity, complete with fines, enforcement agents, and bureaucratic oversight. The same is true for hunting, camping, or even gathering wood. These activities have always been part of survival and tradition. But when the state inserts itself as gatekeeper to such basic liberties, natural rights devolve into government privileges. Such erosions of liberty are now widely accepted throughout our society. Americans must also ask permission to build a doghouse, install a compost bin, or place a tiny home on their land. Even driving on your own property can be restricted if the vehicle is not registered with the state. One can make the case for regulating traffic on public roads, but when private land becomes subject to the same level of control, the question must be asked, where is the boundary of the state, and who drew it? This bureaucratic overreach extends deep into personal hobbies and harmless forms of expression. Making homemade wine, beer, or cider, a tradition as old as civilization, is restricted or regulated in many jurisdictions, even when for personal use. Want to sell a few jars of jam or home-baked bread at a local market? Good luck navigating food handling permits, facility inspections, and commercial licenses. These are hardly dangerous or subversive acts. They are the activities of peaceful people trying to participate in the economy or simply live freely. But under the modern regime of unbounded regulatory interference, even the most harmless acts are burdened with red tape. Worse yet, non-commercial activities like teaching yoga, cutting hair, or playing music in public spaces have been swept up in occupational licensing schemes. Street musicians in urban parks must often apply for permits or face fines. These restrictions do not serve the public. Instead, they protect established interests from competition and create revenue streams for local governments. These policies raise a fundamental question. Who owns your life? If you need permission to plant a garden, catch a fish, teach a skill, or camp in the woods, then the answer is clearly not you. The state has quietly assumed ownership of everyday life without ever having to justify why those who pose no threat must ask permission to be left alone. Proponents of licensing often claim it's to ensure quality, prevent abuse, or maintain standards. But history shows that most licensing schemes have far more to do with control and revenue than public interest. Such barriers to entry disproportionately harm the poor, newcomers, and independent-minded citizens. The government has created a two-tiered system where those with connections and capital can comply, while the rest are criminalized for just trying to live freely. At the root of this problem is the philosophical shift from a government of limited powers to one of unlimited overreach. The founders understood that the role of the state was to protect life, liberty, and property, not to micromanage every peaceful activity. But that distinction would inconvenience the motives of the modern administrative state. Increasingly, the freedom to act is devolving into the freedom to beg. To preserve liberty, Americans must challenge the presumption that government is the rightful owner of every aspect of daily life. That challenge starts by reclaiming the right to live, build, teach, play, and create without asking permission. In a free society, there should be no tolerance for bureaucracies seeking to wedge themselves between peaceful people and their pursuits.
Can you say why America is the greatest country in the world?
Freedom and freedom. So let's keep it that way.
I think that the real job that we have that confronts us is to somehow be able to sell our fellow Americans on the moral superiority of personal liberty.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.